Hello again. This is Sarah Lancaster, and this is my presentation of The Truman Show. Now, The Truman Show is a very good example of just a basic hero's journey. So, we start our film with our hero, Truman, and we just kind of follow him through his ordinary world at the beginning of the film as he leaves home, says goodbye to his wife, goes to work, just kind of like this cheery, like the sun is out and he's waving to his neighbors, and we just kind of see him interact in his ordinary world. And we kind of see his call to adventure, however, is on the way to work he buys a magazine, which is normal enough, but when he gets to work, he tears up an ad that has a woman on it, and he tears out a portion of her eyes, and we see him pull out this picture out of his desk drawer built of all these different pieces from magazines, and we kind of see him building what a perfect woman would look like through all these different ads that he's torn up and pieced back together. And so we kind of see this call to adventure that even though he has this perfect world with a wonderful wife, he's building something that he doesn't have because he knows deep inside, deep at this point in the film, that maybe he wants something more. He wants a woman that's not his wife. And so Truman kind of has to be his own mentor, though, because we find out that his world is actually a fake world. It's been built by producers in Hollywood who film his everyday life, and everyone around him, his wife, his friends, his family on the show, everyone is an actor. His world is basically just a giant set that he's living on, and he's been trapped in this giant bubble as they want to film his world and put it on TV. But he doesn't know this. He is unaware of the fact that he's on television. So, we see him kind of cross the first threshold, however, because one day he's driving to work, listening to the radio, it's normal every day, and then he overhears on his radio these two operators talking on this channel, kind of like the people who are up in the sky watching him that are filming the show. They're talking back and forth on a channel that he's not supposed to hear, but his radio is picking it up. He's like, that's really unusual. What is that noise? What are these people talking about? What is this? So he kind of begins to realize maybe this world's not exactly what I think it is. Maybe it's not really real. And so he kind of goes through the test allies and enemies section he goes and meets with his mother, he talks to his best friend, and then we also see him kind of go through a memory where he remembers this girl that he fell in love with in college, and he goes back through remembering how much he loved her and how before she was dragged literally off of the show, she talked to him about how his world wasn't real. She was trying to convince him, Truman, your world isn't real, this isn't real, before the producers of the show literally dragged her off of the show because they didn't want Truman to know that his world was fake. So we kind of go through that test allies and enemy section, and then he kind of continues to suspect maybe this world isn't real, maybe this isn't right, and he realizes that the world is fake in his approach to the cave when he actually goes to visit his wife at work because he's suspicious that that's not even a real thing. And he goes into this hospital where his wife is a nurse, and when he goes in, he sees all of these doctors forcibly, you can't see her, shoving shelves in front of him, literally saying, you can't see her, this isn't a real thing, back away, you can't be here. And he's like, what's going on? This isn't right. This isn't real. And there's kind of the ordeal of the moment is when he gets his wife in the car and he's like, honey, this world isn't real. Look at all these cars around us. They're all literally driving in synchrony. This isn't weird to you? This isn't strange? And he tries to literally leave the island. He drives, because his world is built on an island, and he drives across this bridge in his car. His wife is yelling at him because she's an actress. Stop, Truman, stop. You're crazy. Please stop. You're going to kill me. And he gets dragged out of his car, and he basically gets brought back to his world that he's been living in, which is really kind of sad, personally. Anyway, but we see his reward sort of is he returns to his normal life, but he now knows this isn't right. This is not a good world. This isn't real. None of this is real. This is all just a facade. Anyway, and so his road back is he tricks the operators up above who are filming him into thinking that he's asleep in his basement. When they find out that he's not actually asleep because he covered this thing with a blanket down in his basement, and they're like, yeah, that's him, he's asleep. And they go to check, turns out he's not asleep, that's not him. He falls asleep and he actually escapes by tricking them. And then the resurrection of the film is the camera finds him, and he's on a boat escaping the island. He's ready, he's leaving, and he's on this boat, and he's sailing away from the island, trying to get away from this world that he knows is not real. And he runs into the wall. Literally a wall. His boat hits the wall of the set that his entire world has been built in, because his world is in a bubble. His island, everything is just surrounded by a giant wall, keeping him in. And so his boat hits the wall, and he kind of hits that moment of the resurrection that he's trying to escape. And then we see the return with the elixir when he climbs out of the boat, climbs up a pair of stairs that are leading out of this bubble that he's been trapped in his whole life, and he waves to the cameras and says, "Good afternoon, good evening, and good night," which is kind of his catchphrase, and he escapes this world that he was trapped in his entire life. So, that's the hero's journey with The Truman Show, and I hope that you liked it. Hi, this is Sarah Lancaster, and I am in your art of storytelling class. I am giving my pitch on the film Witness, and I'm just going to go on ahead and start. So our film begins with a murder in a darkened train station bathroom, and we just see these two guys barge into this bathroom and slit this guy's throat, and you're like, oh my gosh. But there is a witness to this murder, a little Amish boy in one of the stalls. And so when the cops arrive at the scene, they see the little boy who's with his mom, Rachel Lapp. The boy's name is Samuel, and they begin questioning him. The key questioner, the key cop on the case, his name's Captain John Booth, and so he's questioning the little boy, and he takes him back to the police station, asking him, taking him through a lineup of all these different criminals who kind of fit the description, and he's like, which one is a murderer? The little boy doesn't see any of them, but he notices a newspaper clipping on the wall of a police officer, and he recognizes him as the killer. So Samuel points to the police officer in the clipping and is like, that's the murderer. And John Booth is like, oh no, there's a dirty cop. So he goes to his boss. He's like, hey man, there's a dirty cop in our system, and we really need to catch him. John Booth is later in the day, he's getting back in his car in a parking garage, and the dirty cop who killed someone in the bathroom shows up and shoots him. Not fatally, but he still shoots him, making John Booth realize, oh my goodness, my boss is also dirty. He told the dirty cop because he's the only one that knew about the dirty cop. So John Booth, fearing for his life and fearing for the life of the Amish boy and his mother, grabs both of them and gets in a car, and they go back to the Amish home of Rachel Lapp, the mother, and the son Samuel. They go back to the Amish community to hide. Now, John Booth is really injured because he obviously got shot, and so it starts to kind of heal up while he's staying with Rachel and her family. And during that time, there's actually a little bit of romance between the two of them, which is kind of interesting. You see that dynamic happen with John and Rachel, and they kind of fall in love. But there's also some tension because Rachel has another thing with another Amish guy in their community named Daniel, and you see the two of them kind of look at each other while she's also looking at John Booth, and you're like, what's going to happen? But as time goes on, the dirty cop in question, hit John Booth's boss, as well as the murderous one, both find out where John is, and so they show up. The two dirty cops and another guy show up on site at the Amish home, and they trap John in a barn because they all three have guns. But John, being the tricky cop that he is, tricks one of them and kills him, and then he grabs his gun and shoots one of the other dirty cops, killing him. So there's only one left, and that one left, which is John's boss, who is the ringleader of all of the dirty cops, is holding a gun up to Rachel's head, ready to take John down, and all of the Amish community flood the scene, and the dirty cop, realizing that there's no escape, there's nowhere for him to go, he sets his gun down and surrenders. And so the film kind of wraps up with the dirty cop being taken off to jail, John being able to go back to his normal life because he realizes he can never be with the Amish woman who he kind of sort of loves now, Rachel, and we just kind of wrap it all up with our dirty cop going off to jail and the situation ending. So that's kind of the film Witness. It's kind of an action adventure type film, but there's also a little bit of romance, which is kind of cool. So How long is that?